Welcome back to Insects for Fun. I got sick with something pretty rough a couple weeks ago, but now I'm back. And with a listener request from YouTube, actually. So today we are talking about the most abundant multicellular animals on planet Earth. Not ants, not beetles, not nematodes, not even mosquitoes. We're talking about tiny crustaceans called copepods. And if you've never heard of them before, that's good because that's kind of the whole point of this episode. Copepods belong to the subclass Copepoda, within the class Maxillopoda, which itself sits within the subphylum Crustacea. So, long story short, these are crustaceans, the same group as crabs, shrimp, lobsters, and barnacles, just much, much smaller. If you've done the sea monkeys episode, you'll remember brine shrimp. Copepods are in that same ballpark of tiny crustacean, but are a completely different and far more ecologically critical group. They're also not the same as the water fleas, which I covered in a more recent episode, although some people do call copepods water fleas, so that can make things a bit confusing. There are around 13,000 described species of copepods, though given how understudied the group is relative to its actual diversity, that number is almost certainly an undercount. They're found in literally every aquatic habitat on Earth. We're talking ocean surface, deep sea trenches, freshwater lakes, rivers, groundwater, hot springs, polar ice melt, moist moss, leaf litter, even bromeliad tanks in tropical forests. If there's water, or even moisture, there is likely a copepod. Molecular evidence suggests that the group has been around for over 300 million years, making them older than dinosaurs by a wide margin. Now, most free-living copepods have a distinctive teardrop-shaped body. They've got a broad head and a thorax tapering to a narrow abdomen. So they're basically, a classic teardrop shape with two sets of antennae. And they also have one simple eye. It's not compound, it's simple. And they also have multiple pairs of leg-like appendages. Adults typically range from 0.2 to 2 millimeters in length, though some polar species reach up to 10 millimeters or about 0.4 inches. And there are also some parasitic species that get much larger. Most of the ones you'd encounter in a standard ocean sample are around 1 millimeter though. So about the size of a sesame seed, and they're transparent enough to nearly be invisible. The name copepod comes from Greek cope, meaning oar, and pos, meaning foot, so they're pretty much just called oarfoots, a reference to the way their legs beat rhythmically to propel them through water. Once you know that, the way they move makes complete sense. Okay, before we get into ecology, I need to talk about the jump, because this is the detail that made me want to do this episode and that most people, if they do know copepods, are familiar with. Copepods are considered by many researchers to be the strongest animals in the world relative to body size, and the fastest jumpers in the animal kingdom measured in body lengths per second. When a copepod detects a predator, which it does by sensing minute vibrations and water movements, it launches an escape jump that reaches 500 body lengths per second. That's 5 times that of a springtail. And those are also really fast, if you remember that episode. To put that in perspective, a cheetah, famously the fastest land animal, achieves about 23 body lengths per second at full sprint. A hummingbird in a courtship dive reaches about 385 body lengths per second. A copepod doing an escape jump does 500. Out of water, where drag is much lower, a scaled-up version of this jump would theoretically cover several kilometers in a single second. So, how do they do it? Copepods have 2 completely separate propulsion systems. One for routine swimming, using vibrating oar-like appendages, and one for jumping, using a separate set of stronger legs tuned for maximum short-term force. The nervous system that triggers this is very, very fast for an invertebrate. Their neural pathways are ensheathed in a myelin-like coating that dramatically speeds up signal transmission. This is something that's extremely rare outside of vertebrates. So when threat signals fire, the legs respond in milliseconds. Researchers at the Technical University of Denmark had to use high-speed cameras running at thousands of frames per second just to capture the jump. Even then, it happened so fast that the full details were only visible when footage was slowed down dramatically. And speaking of special things, this next part that I'm about to get into will probably blow your mind. I mean, we think of insects as the most abundant organisms on Earth, right? But here's the thing. They don't really hold a candle compared to the number of copepods on this planet. In marine environments alone, they outnumber insects by an estimated 3 orders of magnitude, meaning there are roughly 1,000 times more copepods than all insects combined in ocean habitats. The combined mass of all copepods on Earth likely represents the largest animal biomass on the planet, competing for that title only with Antarctic krill, which I guess I should probably do an episode on as well. In a single liter or quart of seawater from a productive ocean region, you might find dozens to hundreds of individual copepods. Scale that across the entire surface of the ocean, and the numbers become essentially incomprehensible. They are, in the most literal sense, everywhere. And yet, most people have never seen one. They're transparent, they're a millimeter long, they drift with plankton currents, and are invisible to the casual observer unless you have a hand lens or a microscope. So, if they're that abundant, then they must be pretty important as a food source, right? NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, calls copepods the cows of the sea. That comparison is actually really appropriate, and let me explain why. At the base of the ocean food web, you have phytoplankton, microscopic photosynthetic organisms that capture sunlight and convert it into energy. They're the grass of the ocean. A single copepod can consume up to tens of thousands of phytoplankton cells per day. Copepods are the primary grazers of phytoplankton across the world's oceans. They eat the grass, and then everything else eats them. Larval fish depend on copepods. Juvenile salmon depend on copepods. Adult herring, mackerel, sardines, and anchovies depend on copepods. Baleen whales, including blue whales, the largest animals that have ever existed, depend on copepods. And that's not even getting into seabirds. The entire marine food web, from the smallest fish to the largest whale, traces back to copepods at the base. If you collapse copepod populations, you collapse fisheries. You collapse whale populations, you collapse seabird populations, pretty much the whole structure comes down. And this isn't hypothetical either. Researchers actively monitor copepod populations as early warning indicators of ocean health, because their numbers and species composition reflect changes in water temperature, salinity, acidity, and pollution levels before those changes show up anywhere else. They are the bioindicator canary in the coal mine for the entire ocean. But there's actually even more to this. They hold importance to carbon emissions. Yeah, so copepods play a massive and underappreciated role in carbon sequestration, the process of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locking it away. They do this in 2 main ways. The first is through what's called the biological pump. Here's how it works. Phytoplankton at the ocean surface absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere during photosynthesis. Copepods eat phytoplankton. Copepods produce dense, carbon-rich fecal pellets that sink rapidly to the deep ocean, much faster than dead phytoplankton cells would on their own. And on the way down, these pellets carry carbon with them, effectively transporting surface carbon to the deep sea where it stays locked away for potentially thousands of years. The copepod is essentially a biological elevator, moving carbon from the atmosphere to the ocean floor. The second mechanism is the lipid pump. Many copepod species in colder and polar regions accumulate enormous fat reserves, literally filling their bodies with oil. In autumn, these copepods dive to depths of 600 to 1,400 meters, or roughly 2,000 to 4,500 feet below, to overwinter in a dormant state. That lipid-rich biomass sinks with them, carrying carbon deep into the ocean for the winter. When you add up both pumps, copepods contribute substantially to the ocean's capacity to act as a carbon sink, which is currently absorbing nearly 2 billion tons of atmospheric carbon annually. The indirect oxygen contribution flows from this too. By grazing phytoplankton and preventing them from blooming out of control, copepods maintain the conditions for continued phytoplankton productivity. And phytoplankton are responsible for producing roughly half of all the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. Not the Amazon rainforest, not terrestrial plants in general, phytoplankton. And copepods are what keep phytoplankton ecosystems healthy and productive. Okay, so I know largely we've been talking a lot about ocean copepods, but it's not all open ocean. When most people picture copepods, they imagine tiny, transparent specks drifting in, ocean waters, and that's accurate for a lot of species. But as I mentioned at the top of the episode, the group is far more diverse than that. The three main orders are Calanoida, Cyclopoida, and Harpacticoida. Calanoids are your classic open water planktonic copepods. These are the ones filling the ocean in enormous numbers and doing most of the carbon pump work. Cyclopoids are found in both marine and freshwater environments and include some parasitic species. Harpacticoids tend to be benthic, living on the seafloor in sediment, sand, or on algae, and they're built differently with more elongate worm-like body plans. So let's talk about that parasitic thing. Around half of all copepod species are parasitic, which is a fact that surprises most people, including me. These include fish lice, gill parasites, and some of the most morphologically bizarre animals in the entire crustacean group. Parasitic copepods that attach to their hosts can look so modified that they barely resemble copepods at all. Some are basically just egg sacs with attachment structures. The free-living teardrop shape is completely gone. If you want something to look up, the genus Lerneo attaches to freshwater fish and grows a branching egg structure that looks like it belongs in a science fiction film. At any rate, let's move on to freshwater copepods, because they're absolutely worth mentioning. The genus Cyclops, yes, like the one-eyed giant from Greek mythology, is the classic freshwater example and can be found in ponds, lakes, and rivers worldwide. If you've ever looked at pond water under a microscope and seen something small and jerky moving around, there's a reasonable chance it was a cyclops. They're also capable of transmitting guinea worms to humans in parts of Africa, but that's like a whole other rabbit hole, and I don't want to go down that today. What I do want to start going down is the life cycle. Copepods go through a series of developmental stages that are pretty wacky and slightly different from the standard insect metamorphosis we talk about on a regular basis. After hatching from eggs, copepods pass through 6 nauplius stages. The nauplius is the larval form shared by most crustaceans, recognizable by its oval shape, 3 pairs of appendages, and a single simple eye. After 6 nauplius stages, they molt into 5 copepoded stages that increasingly resemble the adult. Although if we're talking about copepods, the nauplius stage is probably not that different for most of these. After the 5th copepoded stage, they molt into the adult, fully formed, sexually mature, and ready to do their part in keeping waters clean. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. As always, if you enjoyed, please leave a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're on. It genuinely helps. And bonus episodes and vlogs are available at patreon.com/insects for fun. Hit me up on IG at insects4fun or email insectsfordummies@gmail.com with a topic you want covered. And you'll hear from me hopefully next week.